This weekend, it's finally here. Off the bye week, we've got a new head coach. We're going to be facing the number 12 ranked Tennessee Volunteers. Head coach Josh Heupel, he's been there for a couple of years now. So far this season, they're 4-1. Their one loss coming in a home loss to number six Georgia at the time, 41-44 in overtime. That was a crazy game. Tennessee, honestly, I believe was leading the majority of that game, but it was a back and forth showdown. Fourth quarter, Tennessee really took a lead. Georgia was able to tie it, and then they ultimately did beat them in overtime. But Tennessee beat Syracuse earlier in the season by about 20 points. They beat East Tennessee State. Obviously, that one doesn't matter as much. Same with UAB. And then last week, they played, or 2 weeks ago, because they're also coming off a bye, they won at Mississippi State 41-34 in overtime. So, and there are two real big games of the season. Syracuse has also been a decent team, obviously, most notably beating Clemson. But they've played two overtime games in the SEC so far. One in a 7-point win against Mississippi State, and one a 3-point loss to Georgia. Tennessee's really kind of does what we do to an extent, but just better, to be honest with you. They're a very high powered offense. I was reading and doing some, just prep for this episode. And I pay attention to college football, pay attention specifically to the SEC a ton. And I don't think I realized that Tennessee right now is averaging 51 points a game. And three of these games are like real games, like Syracuse, Georgia, Mississippi State. And even in those games, 45 points against Syracuse, 41 points against Georgia, 41 points against Mississippi State. So, like, even in these real games, they're continually putting up 40 plus points. So, this is a team that, similar to us, just is a ultimately high powered offense. And they're led at the helm by quarterback Joey Aguilar. And that's the guy who transferred in from App State. He was originally committed to UCLA. Everybody knows the whole summer saga of Nico Iamaleava. What happened with him? He ultimately decided to transfer out of Tennessee. Essentially, they traded quarterbacks. So Aguilar, who was committed to UCLA, is now the quarterback at Tennessee. And I think ultimately for most people who've watched college football, specifically watched Tennessee and Nico, I think they didn't really expect too much of a drop. And if anything, up until this weekend when UCLA shocked the world and beat Penn State, any Tennessee fan was just thrilled with how that trade went because Nico was on an 0-4 UCLA team, didn't look great. And Joey Aguilar so far, 1,500 passing yards through 5 games, 13 touchdowns, 5 interceptions. He's really led this offense. To have not a ton of time to really learn the system, get in here and get acclimated, he's really had a really phenomenal season so far. So shout out to him. I'm going to mention some of the guys to watch for on the offensive, defensive side of the ball for Tennessee, just as fans looking to see who their impact players are. But just to break down a little bit of them on the offensive side of the football, they've got three running backs with 35 plus carries. That includes Star Thomas, who was a transfer in from Duke, Deshaun Bishop, who's their leading rusher, and then Peyton Lewis. And they all have 3+ touchdowns as well. Another name to watch too on the receiving side, number 17, Chris Brazzell II. This is a guy who hasn't really been too productive throughout his college career. But man, has he been productive this year. 31 catches, 531 receiving yards, 7 touchdowns. He has 300 plus yard games. He's gotten a touchdown in his last 4 games. He's had a 3-touchdown game against Georgia, 177 yards to go alongside that. Like, this guy's been very productive, and we're going to have really a job set for us this weekend trying to stop him. So Chris Brazzell II, number 17 on Tennessee, is really a player to watch as well. And then lastly, about the offense, just the offensive line has only allowed 4 sacks all season. So we've been semi-productive getting after the quarterback. It's been hit and miss. It's really been a lot of Quincy Rhodes Jr. and a little bit of Philip Lee, and then there's kind of everyone else. But to only allow 4 sacks against a defense or an offensive line that's now had to face the defense of Syracuse, who got 0 sacks against Joey Aguilar. Georgia, who had 1 sack against the Tennessee quarterback. And then Mississippi State, who had 2 sacks in that game. So three of their 4 sacks have come in their really the 3 biggest games. But in those 3 games that have mattered, they've had a total of 3 sacks. So at best, maybe we get a sack on this quarterback. Like, he's not necessarily a dynamic rusher so far this season. He's gotten 58 rushing yards. Obviously, with college football, sacks are kind of thrown in there. He doesn't have a ton though, and he has 2 rushing touchdowns. So we're in a spot where he's a pocket passer, so we're not going to necessarily see where we've seen these past couple games, even with CJ Carr 2 weeks ago against Notre Dame, these dual threat quarterbacks that have really made us look silly on defense. He's going to be a guy that if we can pressure him, that's going to really help us. But like I was talking about, only 4 sacks by this offensive line. That's a really big key statistic for them, and we're gonna have our work cut out for us trying to get after the passer. If we switch over to the defensive side of the football for Tennessee, they've got 4 defenders with 3+ sacks. This is a team that could really get after the passer. Anybody that kinda kept up with the draft or college football last year, specifically Tennessee, there was a lot of guys on this defensive line that they kind of rotated in and out of. It's a similar system this year, but a lot of names on that defensive line that they ultimately lost from last season. That includes second round pick Omar Norman Lott, first round pick James Pierce Jr., and several other guys on that defensive line that are ultimately gone. Not been too much difficulty really transitioning into this season and seeing those pass rushers and those defensive linemen work. They've really done well. Specifically, number 19 defensive end Joshua Josephs. This is a guy so far this season. He leads their defense in sacks. I believe he's got 5.5 tackles for loss, 4 sacks, 22 tackles so far, and 2 forced fumbles. Like he's really been a productive player for them. He's really been kind of the headliner of that defensive line. If we go to the second level, we look at a guy named Arion Carter, number 7 on the defense. He leads the SEC in assisted tackles. He has just under 50, 49 total tackles on the season, 32 of those being assisted tackles. Also, 2 tackles for loss and a sack, couple pass deflections, and a forced fumble. So he's another impact player for them to watch. And then on the back end, there's a name to watch and then 2 names that you're probably not going to get to see. Number 8, cornerback Colton Hood's really been their most productive defensive back so far this season. He's got an interception for a touchdown, 5 pass deflections, 19 tackles, 2 tackles for loss. He's been a really kind of a gadget player for them, plays on the outside. He's really been impactful, and one of the reasons I'm sure has been because of Jermon McCoy being out for a lot of this season so far, and he's going according to all reports for right now. Obviously, it's Monday, and the game's not until another 5 days from now. But Jermon McCoy looks like he's going to be out, and then Ricky Gibson III, another defensive back for them, who I don't believe played since the first game of the season, is also out in this game. So 2 impact defensive players for them on the back end that are ultimately going to be out. Jermon McCoy was an All SEC player last year, so to have him out, I guess, really benefits the Razorbacks. But it doesn't seem like he's been a large part of their defense so far this season, anyway. Uh, but that's the names to watch necessarily for the Tennessee Volunteers. But I was kind of doing some digging in, and we haven't done this yet, talking about a game, but I kind of wanted to look into like some of the mismatches that are going to benefit us and then ultimately maybe cause us to struggle. So let's start with the benefits of where we can maybe win this weekend, so to say. Let's start with Tennessee's defense and what they've allowed. Tennessee right now is allowing 260 pass yards per game and 4 interceptions allowed. So what does that mean? They allow a lot of passing yards and they don't turn over the football a ton. So that's less than an interception a game. And they've obviously gotten the opportunity to feast off a team like East Tennessee State and UAB and still have only come up with 4 interceptions so far this season. Where does that benefit us? Well, we're a team that Taylor Green is averaging 300 passing yards per game and 5 interceptions only. So right now, they don't necessarily turn over the football a lot from an interception perspective, and we don't necessarily throw a lot of interceptions. Taylor Green's thrown a couple more uh, in these last couple games, specifically against Notre Dame as well. But he throws the football, he throws a ton of yards, and he doesn't throw a lot of interceptions. And for our sake, Tennessee gives up a lot of yards and doesn't pick off the ball a lot. So that's one spot where I anticipate us having success. Another instance, too, this is a team that allows just under 30 points per game, 29. And on fourth down conversions, they give up 67% of those fourth downs. And we're a team, Petrino talked about it actually in his press conference today, that had an opportunity. They were asking him about fourth down opportunities. Like, are you, as a coach that's shown to be a little more aggressive, obviously an offensive minded guy, are you going to go for it more on fourth down? Are we going to see some different management on those fourth downs than we saw under Sam Pittman? And Petrino kind of hinted to the fact that yes and maybe. And the maybe is really like we haven't had a lot of those opportunities. Right now, this season, we're only 1 for 3, so 33%. But for them to be 67% on giving those up, I think that's a spot where we can maybe have a little more success than we've had this season. And maybe we have some spots in midfield, 40-yard line, 50-yard line, where we can maybe on a 4th and 2 do we go for it? And I think we will. And I think one of those reasons too is Scott Starzik. He's been fine as a kicker. Obviously, he's a freshman, so you don't necessarily know what you're going to get going into a season. He hasn't been uber productive. He hasn't been terrible. It's just been kind of. And I think that when we have opportunities, maybe at like the 38, on a 4th and 3, I think we're just going for it. Like, or even at the 30-yard line, it's 4th and 1 or 4th and 2. Like, I think we may just go for it. So I think Petrino, in a spot where he knows that he's kind of playing with house money, but also trying to compete for this job to have an opportunity to be our head coach next year, I think he's going to take his shots. Like, I think he really is going to prioritize being aggressive. And on 4th down plays, maybe we can see how good of a team we are this weekend. And then from that points per game perspective, they're giving up around 30. We're a team that scores around 37. Obviously, Notre Dame game was a bit of a letdown offensively. Everybody was hoping that that one spot, that one calling card we've had all year, even in losses, that we would show up in that game. Obviously, we had 4 straight games of 30 plus points, and we only scored 13. But I anticipate that we will have a little more of a productive offensive showing this weekend. And I think that's going to be large part in the fact that Tennessee gives up around 30 points per game. Now, that was the positives, right? That's where we can maybe win this weekend and on the passing game and in the points column. But where are we going to potentially struggle? Obviously, that seems like there could be several places for that. But let's start with the rushing yards, the where we give up as a rushing yard perspective, and that's 168 rush yards per game. As a defense, we give up that many rush yards, and we've given up 11 rush touchdowns this season. That's around 2 per game. Well, this is not the team you want to have done that against because Tennessee is averaging around 200 rushing yards per game and 14 rushing touchdowns. So that's almost 3 rushing touchdowns per game. I mentioned it earlier. They've got 3 different backs with 35 plus carries. Star Thomas being kind of the headliner of that group. Um, and so this is going to be a real test for our run defense. Obviously, like I mentioned, Jay Hayes is now our defensive line coach. What's he going to bring to the table? This is a really unique opportunity to really establish yourself as a assistant coach in your first game because this is a spot where Tennessee is so effective running the football, and we're going to really need guys like Cam Ball, Ian Jeffrard, and then at the linebacking level, Stephen Dix Jr., Xavier Sorey to really step up. And this Saturday is going to be a real test for our rush defense and what we can do on that side of the football. And then the second stat, we've gotten 3 fumbles lost this season, and 3 doesn't even sound too bad when you think about 5 games. It's not even one a game. However, man, 2 of those have just been the most pivotal fumbles. Even the third against Notre Dame was just a tough spot too, as we were just getting beat down. But those have been really pivotal fumbles. And Tennessee has taken 3 forced fumbles back to the house this season. So this is a spot where we got to hold on to that football tight. And if not, Tennessee has shown the ability to force fumbles and turn them into real points quickly. So that's an interesting stat. Final stat, we average 6.2 penalties per game on the offensive side of the football. Or on the defense. Like we have 6 penalties per game, offensive and defensive side. Tennessee forces a lot of penalties as well. They've enforced 7.2 penalties per game. So we could be a little undisciplined and give up penalties both on the offensive and defensive side of the football. And Tennessee seems to capitalize on those and forces teams into penalties. So this weekend, that's another instance where when you make a coaching change, especially in our spot where you've seen mismanagement from Pittman with time mismanagement, but also just the discipline of like we talked about it a lot. I talked about it a lot on this show. With the Memphis game, you come out after a 2-minute timeout and get a penalty and have to give up yards, and it's just one of those that, like the discipline there is just like that. That's a coach problem, and so I'm excited to see Petrino and see if he can kind of whittle that number down from 6.2 to maybe like 3 to 4 penalties a game. But Tennessee, like I said, is somebody that really does a good job of forcing those penalties. So those are the stats to know which ones may benefit us, which ones may cause us to struggle. But I'm going to give you, and I've done this pretty much every week of the season, 2 hogs to watch. I'm going to give you one on the offensive side of the football, and then I'm going to give you one on the defensive side of the football. We'll start on the offensive side of the football. Then we'll start with wide receiver Omega Blake. This offense has been just insane this season. Like I don't think a lot of people expected it to this caliber. Obviously, we're coming off a Notre Dame game that didn't look as impressive, but we've really been a very potent offense this season. Taylor Green has really just had some really great moments. He's throwing for 1,400 passing yards, 12 touchdowns, 5 picks. But to get it back to Blake, Blake's been our number 1 receiver this whole season. Our second leading receiver is Rohan Jones. He has 220 receiving yards. Omega Blake almost has double that. He's gotten 399 receiving yards. He has double the amount of receptions as the next closest receiver. He has 30. Raylan Sharp has 14. And Omega Blake leads the team in receiving touchdowns. So 3 receiving touchdowns on the season. This is a guy that has game in and game out just really been productive. Even in a down game against Notre Dame, he had 6 catches for 73 yards. All 5 games, he's had 5+ catches, 60+ yards. He hasn't got into the end zone since the Ole Miss game. I anticipate that's going to happen this weekend. Tennessee, we talked about it. They've given up 260 passing yards per game. Omega Blake, I see him being the recipient of a lot of those. Wouldn't be surprised if he has a 100+ yard receiving game against the Volunteers this weekend. We switch over to the defensive side of the football. Safety Larry Worth III. I've put him on this list before, and he's a guy to me, like a lot of the defense this season, hasn't been very good. He's struggled. He's been not the best player in coverage. Obviously, he's a guy that is really athletic. He came here from Jacksonville State and last season really showed off his athleticism. He's not necessarily the best player in coverage. He can miss tackles, but he's a guy that is really rangy and is very, very athletic player. And I was talking to a guy who was talking about how Larry Worth's best game last year was against the Tennessee Volunteers because the way that we deploy our defense, Larry Worth was kind of in a spot where he just got to be himself and kind of roam all sides of the football. He was in the middle. We were running a 3 high safety look. And Larry Worth was that middle guy and really gave Nico fits. Now, obviously, this isn't the same type of quarterback, but we looked our best against Tennessee last year, and Larry Worth III did as well. He's a guy this season who's been, as a tackler, our fourth leading tackler on the season. He has 26 total tackles, but really outside of that, he hasn't done a lot. He has a half tackle for loss and a pass deflection. He's not really been impactful other than just tackling players, and even then, he's kind of missed tackles here and there. But I anticipate this game, a guy who had success against this team last year, to have success again. So I'm excited to see what this defense is going to do uh, this weekend, and that's where we're going to spend a little bit more time talking about the Razorback side of the football and the defense because Wilson, Chris Wilson, the new defensive coordinator, he's going to have his work cut out for him this weekend. Like this is a high-powered offense, one of the best offenses in the country, averaging over 50 points per game, and has scored 40+ points against all 3 Power 4 opponents they played this year, and they're at home off a bye. Like, talk about a test in your first week as the interim defensive coordinator. And you've got a real spot to show off, right? Our team has not looked great. Xavier Story, to me, is a guy who has underperformed this season. Even Larry Worth, the guy I just mentioned, who has underperformed this season. This secondary room, this linebacking room, this interior defensive line room, they've struggled this year. And this is a spot where Chris Wilson can really show, hey, is this a player issue or is this a coaching issue? And he's not going to hold Tennessee to 15 points or something, but he's got a real spot to encourage his defense and really see if his defense can make critical stops or critical turnovers. In shootout games, which I anticipate this to be, that's the biggest thing is can you get timely stops and can you get big time turnovers? And that I'm interested to see if that's what our defense can produce this weekend. So I mentioned Larry Worth III is a name to watch. I'll throw out a couple more. Uh, Caleb Wooden, another guy I thought about putting on this list. Shakur Smalls. These are really nickelback safety type players. And then Xavier Story Jr. I'm going to continue to bring him up week in and week out because I've been disappointed with his play, but I believe he's got it in him. He's a guy who's shown traits as a coverage linebacker, who's kind of struggled with his ability to tackle this season, but he's been the senior leader. He's the guy who's in the middle of the defense, and I'm interested to see post firing. This is the first game. You've got a lot to show what he's going to do in this game. So I'm excited to see those guys on the defensive side of the football. On the offensive side, I mentioned Omega Blake, a couple other names to know. Cam Shanks and Raylan Sharp. Jalen Brown gets hurt. These 2 guys are going to be really pivotal in the slot as CJ Brown kicks out outside. What do both of those guys provide in the slot, and what do they look like against this Tennessee defense who is notorious for giving up points? And then Rohan Jones, he's a guy who's gotten this is crazy. 6 catches for 220 yards. That's almost 37 yards of reception, and 2 of his 6 catches have been touchdowns. So when he gets the ball, he's really effective. Look for him to have a couple big catches in this game. But this offense is going to be really run through and has always been run through all season. Quarterback Taylor Green and what he can do with his arm and his legs. He's a guy who's had a really productive season on the ground. He has 441 rushing yards, 8.2 yards an attempt, which is the SEC leader in yards per attempt amongst the qualified players. Uh, but he's just been so productive, both with his arms and with his legs. And if he can really get going, especially with his legs, and maybe open up the game for a Mike Washington Jr. and a Braylon Russell, I really anticipate us to score a lot of points. Like I think Taylor Green can have a really productive game against the Volunteers this weekend, and ultimately we'll see how it goes. Right? I like to give a score prediction at the end of every single game. I've done it every game so far this season. I was right for a good bit. I decided to swap on my preseason pick with Ole Miss and give us a victory, and we came up short. I thought we'd beat Memphis. We didn't. Picked us to lose to Notre Dame, like anybody I think expected, for a lot closer than it was. But this week, right now, as of Monday, 5:47, the spread is 13.5 points in favor of Tennessee. I've seen it start to drop. I wouldn't be surprised if it flirts around 10, even. Like even that Notre Dame line was dropping a ton. I wouldn't be surprised if it drops around 10. I feel like this is the way in the NFL, at least. There's that boost when you fire your coach, like it's just a newfound motivation, a new coach, just hearing from a different guy. Like I just think there's just inspiration and there's just this desire to want to go show off as players, like that we really weren't the problem, we weren't the issue. Like we're excited to play. And I feel like there's that kind of bounce back effect. So I think that idea is going to kind of dwindle the line a little bit from right now. What I'm saying is 13 and a half to maybe 10, 10 and a half. Force you to make a choice on that 10-point line. And then right now the over under is around 70. I've got 69 and a half. I look at this game as a real shootout. I think that I would take the over on the point. 69 and a half is a lot. And even Petrino was funny. They were asking him, like, what do you anticipate for this weekend? Like, is this going to be kind of a shootout game? Do you like your chances? And he talked about how, like, some of the games that he went into that he really thought were going to be barn burners in a shootout ultimately ended up being like a 10-9 halftime score. So this could be that, and I could be totally burned on this, but I would take the over on it on that 69 and a half. And right now, I would take us plus the spread right now, 13 and a half. And ultimately that leads to my score prediction, which I believe is going to be 41-31 Tennessee. I got to be a realist. I got to be realistic in my prediction. And I think Tennessee wins this football game. It's a road game against a top 15 opponent, number 12 Tennessee. And they've had a really productive season. They have a very potent offense who scored 40 plus in all three Power Four games. And I think they'll do it again. I've got them scoring 41. I think they'll flirt around that number. We've held teams to a couple field goals here and there, so I think they may get a couple in this game. They have a pretty good field goal kicker who was a 50-plus yarder. So I think they score 41. I don't think we lean on our kicker too much, so I've got a field goal for us, but I think we score more touchdowns. And I think we get back to what we were in the previous 4 weeks of the season, scoring 30 plus a game. And I think we scored 31. I'd love for this game to be closer. I mean, I really think that you may see throughout the week just a couple people throwing out an upset alert with Arkansas. But I think at the end of the day, most people are going to stick with Tennessee like I would. And I've got it as a 10-point game with the current spread that'd be favoring Arkansas. But I think the Tennessee Volunteers will get it done, sadly, in Knoxville this weekend, 41-31 Tennessee.